You are now watching the Amazing Mets pregame show with your hosts, Rob and CP.
Let's go Mets! Let's go Mets! Let's go Mets! Let's go Mets!
What's up, Mets fans? Welcome back to the Amazing Mets pregame show right here on my channel, Chris's channel, Twitch, and of course both of our X accounts as well. Hopefully every Mets fan is enjoying themselves right now as the New York Mets beat down on the Washington Nationals last night, and with that impromptu meeting with Alonso, Stearns, and Cohen, Pete Alonso had a night all by him, lonesome self, including a really, really good rookie and top prospect for this Mets team. Chris, how are you doing, buddy?
I'm doing well. I was live for the post game yesterday. I know that you weren't able to join me. We're going to be live for the post game today, hopefully talking about a sweep on both of our channels. So if you were in the live chat yesterday, I do apologize about some technical difficulties with my intro, also my mic cutting out. But, sometimes that happens, especially after an electric 10-1 victory. Listen, there's a lot of stuff we need to talk about. Obviously, we're going to start with last night's game, but we have Mets news, clips galore from today from multiple players, right? Up to 3 players that we have updated news on for you all. I dropped a couple of shorts on my YouTube channel. Make sure you guys go check those out. Hit the thumbs up. And I also dropped a player spotlight today on my channel with Tyrone Taylor, especially him coming off of a multi-hit game last night, in addition to Pete Alonso, Jose Iglesias, and Luis Angel Acuna. And Tyrone Taylor has been absolutely mashing the baseball in the month of September. So I figured I'd go ahead and drop a little bit of a player spotlight on him, because I really do think that he deserves a lot more Mets fans talking about him with how solid he's been for the New York Mets this entire season. I'm excited. Let's bring the brooms out. Let's get into a great episode.
Absolutely. And Tyrone Taylor has been an unsung hero for this team 100%. I mean, he just seems like he's come through in big moments almost all season. And, should we start with Brett Batty? Do you want to start with Brett Batty? Let's start with Brett Batty.
Do it. We might as well just do it. Let's do it.
Let's just pull the rabbit out of the hat. Brett Batty. Chris, we right before we went live, I just realized that I thought it was a fake account. I just told you that when I saw it, I was like, oh, I was like looking at him like, what the? I was doing some stuff and I'm like, no, this is bullshit. This don't make sense. Chris, talk about Brett Batty.
Yeah, so Brett Batty is obviously well ahead of his timeline. Obviously, he got hurt, and the news dropped that he was going to be out 4 to 6 weeks. Again, I dropped a short on this. I took a look at the Syracuse Mets lineup today that they dropped, and it just so happened that Brett Batty was in it, and he's resuming games. He's back on the field, and we're talking about a timeline that's right around 4 weeks, maybe just a little bit less. But again, when you see a fractured ligament, or you see a fractured, I guess, extremity like a finger or whatever, you automatically think on the higher side of those 4 to 6 weeks. Brett Batty has beaten all odds to go out there for the final stretch of the AAA season. And Carlos Mendoza, in his pregame comments today, said that it's still in play, quote unquote, directly from Carlos Mendoza. It's still in play that Brett Batty might rejoin the New York Mets at some point in 2024 as they gear up towards the playoffs. So for me, that means that a guy like Eddie Alvarez, obviously you have the emergence of Luis Angel Acuna. He's not going to be going anywhere. Francisco Lindor, I know a lot of, we also have to talk about Francisco Lindor, because there's also some kind of conflicting, I guess, reports about Francisco Lindor here, whether he resumed baseball activities today or not, but we'll get into that. Again, a guy like Eddie Alvarez that's not postseason eligible for the New York Mets, obviously his roster spot is going to be up for grabs, and that is where potentially Brett Batty might be able to sort of snag that last roster spot if the Mets punch their ticket into October.
Yeah, and you know what? Listen, it's obvious the New York Mets, the front office, they love Brett Batty. They're going to give him every opportunity to show what he can do at the big league level until they actually can't do it no more. Like, it's just a fact. And look, it's amazing he's back, like, in general. So that's a great sign. And, he healed quick. That's awesome. And, you don't want to see a player hurt, especially a young kid. But, again, because I think Eddie Alvarez, if he was postseason eligible, I think Stearns would have kept him on for that little bit of veteran presence, that veteran defense, that speed, and Brett Batty has failed as a major leaguer, regardless of his AAA stats. As we talked about AAA stats yesterday with Acuna, and he kind of showed people that AAA stats mean absolutely nothing last night. But yeah, I mean, look, I'm not gonna be mad about it if Brett Batty is one of those guys that come up on the final 2 series of the year and is like the 24th, 25th guy on the roster. He is a guy that, he has power. He just hasn't shown it at the big league level. I wouldn't mind that coming off the bench. Do I trust him defensively? No. He's gonna play a lot of second base in the last few regular games of the minor leagues. So I would just assume that he would play a lot more second base when he gets an opportunity, not third base. I don't think he's gonna. Look, the last thing I want to do, and I don't think it's gonna get into the head of Vientos, but it might get into the head of Vientos, and you don't need that in the last week or so of the season. Who needs that right now? And I think they're gonna just play him at second base to, like your point, making sure Iglesias stays for the most part healthy as a middle 30-year-old guy that we know. And if my camera goes out, I apologize. My cat is just destroying everything right now. I'm sorry about that. My cat's been all over right around here and he knocked my Wi-Fi out, and I'm not even sure how he did it. But sorry about that. Kind of caught me off guard. Listen, Brett Batty is Brett Batty. Nobody knows what he's going to. Well, right now we know he hasn't been good. I'd give him an opportunity. I would welcome him with open arms, because this is a different team than when Brett Batty was on the team before Vientos took the job over, right? Totally different team. All right, Joey Wendell was on his team when Brett Batty was on this team. So a lot of things have changed with this team since Brett Batty, when he got hurt, or when he got sent down, excuse me. So I think the vibe, I think the chemistry, I think everybody, it seems like anybody who comes into this team just joins the family, basically. And I wonder if Brett Batty's gonna feel that calm, that not that nervousness, but that calm feeling that you see in this team embrace people like Winker, guys that got traded here. It seems like everybody just comes together, and hopefully Brett Batty, if he's gonna come up, like, it's a fact. The Mets kind of made it obvious, the way they spoke about him, that he's probably going to be up, and they love him. So listen, am I going to be against it? No. I mean, you can do worse than Brett Batty. Would you want Brett Batty or Eddie Alvarez if Eddie Alvarez was postseason eligible? Most people would probably say Brett Batty, just because of the potential. Eddie Alvarez is just Eddie Alvarez. Like, he's got speed and plays defense. That's basically it. So listen, Brett Batty, join the family, I guess.
Yeah, and you know what? I mean, I should not sort of let this go unstated, is that I have no expectations for what Brett Baty's contributions are going to be. Yes, I'd like to see Brett Batty on this roster. Like you said, no, there needs to be zero competition at third base. Obviously, Brett Batty is not going to come in here and overtake Vientos' position with what Vientos has done this entire season. Yes, Brett Batty has underperformed severely as a major league ball player, and yes, he's overachieved in AAA for whatever that's worth. Again, I think by default and by the nature of what has been said and what's been hinted at, he will be coming up, but I don't expect him to make any meaningful contributions for the New York Mets down the stretch, or even come playoff time. He's there for the experience, he's there for insurance, and he's there strictly if anybody gets hurt to sort of fill in for that position where need be. But again, right, this is a guy that we Mets fans were all excited about, right? We saw glimpses, I guess, if you could call it that, at the major league level, but nothing for us to indicate, or nothing that indicates to us that he is ready to contribute in crunch time right now while the Mets are trying to clinch a playoff berth. So yes, the news is exciting. It's great to see him back out there. But again, I don't want everyone to get ahead of themselves. I don't want us to get ahead of ourselves. He's not going to be playing any meaningful baseball innings for the New York Mets down the stretch of the season if and when he does come up to this team.
Yeah, absolutely. And, speaking of young talent, you brought up, you made a video about it earlier today, Christian Scott. I'm a little surprised, though, that it took this long to do Tommy John. I mean, this was a few months ago, that he went down with this arm issue, and if he would have done it then, like right off the bat. I know he was trying to, doctors usually try to find ways to avoid that surgery, but most of the time it's inevitable. It's unfortunately it is what it is. But they wasted a couple of months that he could have been recovering and might have been possibly be back next season sometime. I mean, I know they put in that new brace that they've been talking about with the Tommy John and all that, and it's supposed to recover quicker and everything like that. But again, it's not. It's kind of a new technology, so to speak, and there's not, like we were talking about in the group chat, there's not enough data when it comes to pitchers using that brace to see, okay, it's it's 100% successful or 75% successful. It's too small of a sample size to see what can it could be individual how they recover by their own person, the way they recover, and or it could just be the brace is just magic, and it's really doing the job, but we don't really know. We'll see, right? Usually it's what, 18 months, usually 16, 17 months, depending on with the regular Tommy John, when most people actually come back to their somewhat normal self, or if not better. So it's tough. This was a guy that was probably going to be on our rotation next year. But you know what? Sometimes it's a blessing in disguise, because that might push the Mets a little bit closer to a Mania extension and a Severino extension. So they don't have to worry about filling 3 or 4 spots in the rotation next year, even though I think they're going to do that with both of those guys anyway. But maybe it provides a little bit of a push for David Stearns, who is not a guy that that likes to spend big on veteran talent. He likes to give the kids a chance. Maybe this will give him a little bit of a push to extend to sign him a little bit earlier, extension wise. So it's unfortunate news, Chris. And you can talk about it right now. With you brought it up in the video and talked about it in depth a little bit.
Yeah, I don't really know exactly what the plan was there. Like you said, I think it was definitely inevitable in terms of actually having this procedure done. Many people have pointed out the fact that, Christian Scott hasn't really had that high leverage of innings usage as starting pitchers at the MLB level would have in his career. And he's had injury concerns before. So again, it just seems like the new day and age of baseball, unfortunately, is what it is in terms of having that kind of procedure done at some point in these guys' career. We've seen it with DeGrom. We've seen it with Zach Wheeler. DeGrom and Zach Wheeler, right? They had a little bit of different timetables. Zach Wheeler took almost 2 years to come back from his Tommy John surgery. Again, that was probably what, like almost going on a decade ago at this point, I feel like. And then Jacob DeGrom took just over a year, I believe, somewhere around 14, 15 months, something like that. But yeah, this new technology in the brace, right? Because he is having obviously repair and I think a full ligament replacement. And the new brace technology is supposed to get the ligament acclimated and the blood flow in that elbow
Yeah,
acclimated quicker. But again, as you pointed out, right, and I was reading multiple articles about this, is that even though this is supposed to limit the recovery time, right, and try to make it peak so that athletes can come back onto the field within like 7, 8, 9 months, maybe instead of the full year plus, this
yeah,
hasn't really been proved, or no trends have really been seen across major league pitchers. Now, major league pitchers are different than major league position players that have
yeah,
gotten this done and have been able to come back onto the field with no problems, whether it's hitting, throwing in the field, or both. But again, when you talk about giving a ball to a guy every 5th day at the highest level you could possibly play around the world in baseball, and how much stress goes into that, they're obviously still going to need to take the full time to recover and also ramp it back up to start throwing at different levels, whether it be 30 feet to start off, then going to 60 feet, 90 feet, etc. And then long tossing. This is going to be a gradual progress. So
yeah,
that's why in my video I said that yes, maybe by some miracle of a chance, and I don't see why the Mets would do this and rush him, bring him back at the tail end of 2025. But all indications point to him being back to begin the 2026
Yeah.
season after he's had that full season of recovery. So unfortunate news. Obviously, the Mets really wanted to hold out kind of some hope that he could be shut down and it would progress to the point where he could go back and resume throwing without it bothering him. I guess it never got to that point. And, his agent from Clutch Sports ended up breaking the news today that they opted for the Tommy John surgery and to get that process started. So wishing him a speedy recovery. Obviously, never want to see this, especially with the young pitcher being, I think he's 24, 25 years old still, and hope to see him back within the next couple of years for the New York Mets, back and better than ever.
Yeah, absolutely. And funny thing with that brace, right? It's a very very similar contraption to the brace that Aaron Rodgers got on his Achilles. It's a similar brace that they use. Obviously, they it's different measurements when it comes to the ligament of the elbow, and then the Achilles, obviously. But it's a similar concept where the brace is supposed to help with blood flow, like you were talking about. It's supposed to help with the protection of the ligament and all that as well. So it's a very similar. So if you want to look at anything, when it comes to a brace that they use to just reconstruct or put a new ligament in and to protect that ligament, is the brace that's similar to what Aaron Rodgers got, that has been successful in Achilles tears and Achilles surgeries for football players. And it's been very high success rate. And as you see, 40-plus-year-old Aaron Rodgers with running around the field yesterday like nothing really had happened to him for the most part. Again, anything can happen at any given moment. But again, that brace is, and he came back as early as anybody at 39, 40 years old with that injury. So with that type of surgery. So, let's hope that the brace does what it's supposed to do and you get him back earlier, even though you don't have to rush him and it does work out the way they're expecting him to. But again, I'm looking at 2026 for Christian Scott. I don't want to rush him and then he gets hurt again and then you don't got him until 2027. You don't need all that. You don't need a Zach Wheeler situation. You really don't. It kind of cost the Mets, and technically it really didn't cost the Mets in 2015, but it kind of did. And in 2016, well, you seen what happened with all the pitching injuries that they had. They could have used Wheeler at that moment. But let's talk about 2024, right? Let's talk about another young kid that had a game yesterday, Luis Angel Acuna. Man, this kid, that swing. I mean, he's not a big kid. He's not a tall kid, but that ball jumps off his bat. And you saw that home run ball. That ball just flew off his bat, but he had a big hit double earlier in the game. And this kid looks like a player, Chris. He really does. And he is postseason eligible. For anybody who still doesn't know, he is postseason eligible. And by the way, he will make the team. There's no doubt about it in my mind that he's not going to make the team. He's going to be a presence over the last 11 games of the season, and he's definitely going to be a presence in the postseason if the Mets make it. As we all know, or at least hopefully everybody knows, I think Arizona was winning the last time I checked, but the Mets were tied with Arizona. We all know we have the tiebreaker with them. We're 2 games up on the Braves with 11 to play. And with Luis Angel Acuna, and this is your guy, Chris, you brought it up 2 weeks. You brought it up a while ago, but you were really putting an emphasis on it for about 2-3 weeks now that Acuna should be up, and especially the whole situation with the whole DJ Stewart thing. Why another outfielder? You should have brought up an infielder, and you brought up Acuna. This is your guy, so speak nice about him.
Yeah, I mean, I really did kind of foreshadow them bringing him up by just virtue of the way the rosters were shaking out. And obviously, when you talk about the Mets roster, in September versus the postseason, I think in September, the rosters expand to 28 players. So you'll have 14 positional roster spots, and then you'll have 14 pitching roster spots. And then in the postseason, it'll shrink again. So the Mets are still going to have a lot of moves to make. Eddie Alvarez is going to be one of those moves. So we'll see what happens in order to shrink that postseason, the September roster down to the postseason roster, should the Mets make it. Again, nothing's really set in stone, but you're starting to see exactly why I was preaching for them to bring up Luis Angel Acuna in the first place, right? He provides you immediate defense. I know he botched the baseball where Mark Vientos was trying to get the force out. They weren't going to turn two. Luis Angel Acuna seems like he just took his eye off the baseball, just simply flat out missed the baseball. But again, he comes back in the next half inning and rips a double in the left center field gap and gets the Mets back to even. This is the type of maturity that you don't see often in a 22-year-old baseball player, right? Especially late in ball games, going out there at the shortstop position and getting 2 to 3 balls hit to you where you have no room for error in terms of backing your pitcher up because they need to strand that base runner. We see the progression of Luis Angel Acuna, and I really hope the people that were looking at his AAA stats start to sort of eradicate that narrative because it simply does not matter, right? It does not matter what he did in AAA. He's here now. We got to root for the kid. So I've been impressed on all cylinders with what Luis Angel Acuna has provided. A little bit of a cool story by, I believe, Disha Thasar. I think she covers the New York Mets as well. I don't know exactly who she works for, but she's a Mets reporter, does a great job as well. And she mentioned a story. It was awesome. After Luis Angel Acuna hit his first home run last night, the New York Mets players celebrated in the clubhouse by sort of trotting him around in some sort of cart and making him say something to the effect of "Let's fucking go," right, in English, because he did have the translator out there in the post game interview as well, which he did with Steve Gelbs. But listen, this kid is a freaking stud. This team, like you said, in the potential recalling of Brett Batty in terms of gathering around these guys, they've gathered around Luis Angel Acuna, and him getting this experience first and foremost is awesome to see. He's a tremendous ball player. Do I think that, again, I will say this one more time, do I think his power is going to fully translate in terms of what we saw in the Texas Rangers organization versus what we're going to see now? No, I know he just hit a moonshot last night against the Nationals reliever. I understand that, but I do think his power numbers are going to take a dip. But that's fine because his ceiling for what I would love to see out of Luis Angel Acuna as an everyday ball player, potentially for the New York Mets going forward, right, especially starting in 2025, would be a solid up the middle glove, which he already is, but also a guy that can bat eighth or ninth in the lineup, and you can depend on getting on base at a high clip to turn the lineup over. This is awesome to see. I'm glad to see Mets fans and this Mets team, the players in that clubhouse, starting to sort of bring him into the fold of being a true New York Met because, like you said, the camaraderie of this team right now seems to be sky high. And everything that we're hearing from these reporters that are actually in the clubhouse and seeing how these players are interacting on an individual level with each other, it's peak Mets, man. I love it. This is what it's all about. And this is something that we were hunting for. And we were wondering why this wasn't present last year when we were talking about this team in 2023. The vibes are up, right, in the clubhouse, and the vibes should be up here in the chat, right? Everybody spamming W's in the post-game streams after wins, right? And again, there's no reason not to believe. I understand the history of the meltdowns and obviously what happened in 2022. But again, new season, new goals. This is what it's all about. Let's go, Mets. Let's take care of the Nationals. This should be a sweep at this point. You won the first two. You should sweep.
Correct. Absolutely. And listen, I don't think Acuna's power numbers are going to translate like he did in when he was with the Texas organization. Again, if you remember, when the Mets had their Las Vegas team in AAA, their power numbers were outrageously crazy. And that West Coast minor leagues are kind of hitter's paradise when it comes to power. So, he's going to be like an 16 to 18 home run guy, probably, maybe occasionally a 20 home run guy. He's going to be a gap to gap hitter, right? He's going to utilize them gaps, utilize his speed to, extend doubles into triples and all that fun stuff as well. So look, I think he's going to be a very good player. You could see the intangibles. You could see the confidence on the field with Luis Angel Acuna. And, just bringing up Brett Batty earlier, we didn't really see Brett Batty have that aura, that confidence spilling out of him like we do Acuna. And that's not to put down Batty at all. I mean, he could still be a really good big league player. He still has time for that. Obviously, the Mets still believe he does. So, but to see what Acuna is doing in a big moment late in games as well is just outstanding for not only himself, but for us Met fans, right? We've always had this issue with the minor leagues not being as good, as we were one of the worst teams in all of baseball, having players come up and remain on the roster, and they haven't stuck around very long. So it's a new experience for Met fans. It's a long time ago since David Wright and Jose Reyes. I know we had the pitchers in 2015, but how long did that last, right? That kind of went sour very quickly. So, this is a new thing. And I do like that it's position players now that are starting to fill this roster. Look, what Alonzo, Nimmo, McNeil, Vientos, now Acuna, Alvarez. Like, there's a lot of those guys. That's one less position you have to worry about if these guys succeed in the big leagues wearing a Mets uniform. So it's all a great sign. And you see the vibes. Everything's going well right now. Even Alonso, jumped out of his shell and had that meeting just to talk about his experience of 2022. And I want to bring this up, Chris, because before we really get into this game tonight, it really come out what was talked about with Pete Alonso in the meeting with Stearns and all that. And it was more about Pete Alonso really vocalizing or being vocal about how the Mets did not celebrate in 2022. Once they clinched a postseason berth, they didn't celebrate because it was kind of getting to the wire where the division wasn't guaranteed anymore. And they were so focused on the division, they didn't focus on celebrating a milestone, a postseason berth. Like, that should have been celebrated. As much as some people said, oh, you got to win the division or you don't celebrate, nonsense. The Mets did a bad job in 2022 not celebrating when they clinched the postseason berth. And Alonso made that very clear. He was not happy about that. And it was expressed through him that let's finish the job. Let's celebrate a postseason berth and make sure we finish the job. And I love that coming from Pete Alonso, who is a guy that's a quirky guy. We noticed over the last 2 seasons, where even this season, where he's been very bad behind the microphone and saying bad things or things that didn't make sense. He just looked like he kind of lost speaking to the media or speaking in public like that. And to him to come out of his shell like that and, speak to the team, I think that's a great sign. And I'm not saying that last night had a lot to do with it, with his 5 RBIs and that home run and the big RBI, that the blue pit that went over the first baseman's head. But sometimes that things matter, because look, Lindor had that meeting, and ever since then he is an MVP candidate. We only got 11 games to go. He doesn't have a lot of time to figure it out. But if this can get him going a little bit, just getting him out of his shell around his teammates, and maybe it is something that worked with Pete Alonso, but it's one night. He's got to do it again. But what are your thoughts on that Pete Alonso meeting and him kind of like being very vocal about 2022 and let's finish the job here this year in 2024?
Well, it's good to see him taking some ownership and some leadership, and it's good to see somebody else outside of Martinez and Lindor taking that role on in this clubhouse, right? I mean, how many times on this, on these streams have we talked about, me and you, about, Alonzo needing to take some ownership both in the clubhouse and on the field. Seems like he's finally done that. Off to a good start yesterday, but again, like, not going to get carried away over Pete Alonso, multi-hit game with 5 RBIs against the Nationals in a blowout game. We need to see it when it matters in the clutch, runners in scoring position, etc. And obviously, right, I'm never going to try to take away from these players' accomplishments. What he did last night was awesome. I just want to see more consistency and him build off of that, because we've seen tremendous games individually. Yep. Right, 100%. From Pete Alonso. We've seen that already. It's not like he's been out there in 2024 and hasn't provided some decent games for us individually, but we haven't seen him go on that run. We need to see him go on that run, and the time is now. I actually have my watch on today, right? The time is now, Rob. It's 11 games left of the season. You're up 2 on the Atlanta Braves. You're in a prime spot to take care of business yourself. The time is now, and Pete Alonso needs to realize that. And I think he does with his comments in that sort of meeting. And it was awesome to see not only the players get together, but also the leadership and David Stearns and Carlos Mendoza. An awesome report. Glad that it got out in terms of us fans knowing about it, because these guys care. These guys want to get to that level as much as we want them to. They heard all of the smack talk everybody in this fan base and around the league was throwing their way, right? This offseason, when they didn't have the most wowing offseason in terms of the names that they were acquiring. They had the low expectations in their favor, and they're finally starting to deliver. They just need to finish the job. That's first and foremost. And I see you all talking about Mad Dog Russo in the chat here and what his comments were to a topic that we talked about on the pregame yesterday. I want to say this right now. Mad Dog Russo is a clown. He's an absolute clown. He screams at the hilltops over nothing, and he's doing it for the views. And I've already stopped paying attention to everything that he said. So again, that's my take on it. Maybe he'll hear it, maybe he won't. I don't care. He's a clown, and he doesn't really represent us Mets fans as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, he's the New York radio legend, right? Him and Mike and the Mad Dog, we know all about them. But yeah, I mean, we already spoke about the lack of people going to Citi Field. There's many reasons for that. I think there's so many different reasons for that it's pointless to talk about anymore. All I know is that if the Mets make the playoffs, Citi Field will be packed. That's all I care about, right? It shouldn't be like 2022, because there was fans that didn't show up in that series, in that wildcard series, because they didn't lose the division, and it felt like it was a downer. That nobody cared about making the playoffs. Like, it seemed like that, and there was no energy in that ballpark in game 2 and 3 until the Mets actually were winning later in the innings, and it started to get really loud. But I understand what people are talking about, but it is what it is. Like, it's not affecting this team. That's all I care about. It's not affecting this team. You don't think they realize that the upper deck's kind of empty? Of course they do. But are they still winning? Because that's all I care about. That's it. As long as they give a shit, and the people, the diehards who are there, are cheering. And listen, even though it's somewhat of an empty ball, I think it was like 25,000 last night. I don't know. It sounded a hell of a lot to me. You know why? Because those are the real fans. Those are the passionate fans that go regardless. Those are the nutcases, right? Those are the Hectors of the world that go there, win or lose, 100 loss team, 80 loss team. It doesn't matter. Like, those are the people that go to all those games and, spend their hard-earned money and root for this team and live and die with this team, as do I and as do you and many people in the chat. So, just because they don't go to the game doesn't mean people aren't watching on TV. I don't know people's situations life-wise. I'm not going to tell people to spend their hard-earned money or, tell them to go especially when I'm not in New York anymore. So I'm not going to do that to anybody anymore. When I was in New York, it was frustrating because I see it with my own eyes and I'm like, damn, I know it's expensive. I get it. I'm not, I know I spent enough money on season tickets for many, many years. So it is what it is. It's nationally known now. They're in the bottom half of the league in attendance. If they make the playoffs, does anybody give a shit? Because I don't. The team's playing well, regardless of the upper deck mostly empty. I don't care. Can they keep winning? Because that's all I care about, and that's what most Met fans who even don't go care about. So it's who cares? It really doesn't matter. But Chris, today's game, we're ready for a sweep. We can talk about a sweep now. We won the first 2 games, right? We won this series, right? When you win this series and you win the first 2 games, now you can talk about a sweep because it's actually reality. It's right in front of us now. We got 2 lefties on the mound battling it out in DJ Hers and Jose Quintana, who has pitched well his last couple of outings. We've questioned him many, many, many times, and he's proven us wrong. Every time we seem to question him, he pitches well for, we just hope he can continue it in this start. And I think he's going to have probably either 2 more, most likely, depending on if they keep the rotation aligned the way it's supposed to, or they might. He'll have 2 more starts after today. let's get it done. I don't know if we're gonna trust Jose Quintana, but he's pitched well, so the trust might be there right now. I always trust the veteran. I know everybody's not in my corner with that sometimes, but he just figures it out after, like, he knows his mistakes, and it takes him a little bit of time, but then he figures it out and he can go through a stretch here, hopefully through the rest of the season with 11 games to go, and hopefully tonight is one of those excellent or really good performances and puts the Mets in another win column.
Yeah, and I just want to say real quick before we talk about this pitching matchup between two southpaws and DJ Hers and Jose Quintana, as Carlos and Game in the chat are saying, like, back to that point about the Mets fans not showing up at home, nobody will also tell you that Mets fans also show up on the road. You take
Correct.
a look at Pittsburgh, you take a look at Seattle, all the way across the country where there's so many Mets fans over there showing up to games. Miami, I can tell you personally, over here in DC, right? At Nationals games, I can tell you at this point of the season, and even if it was early in the season, there's about 75% Mets fans that overtake Nationals Park. So no one will tell you about that, but let's just go ahead and cry about why Citi Field is always empty. Anyways, it doesn't really matter. Again, I shouldn't get too riled up about the topic because it's a non-talking point for me. It's really not a talking point for me. It's only a talking point for media personalities, it seems. So again, like you said, two southpaws, DJ Hers and Jose Quintana. Starting off with DJ Hers, he's already had 2 starts against the New York Mets this year. The very first outing that he had was not so great. Less than 5 innings pitched to 4 earned runs of baseball. I said the same thing on my post game yesterday. And in the second time out, I believe it was July 2nd, somewhere around that time frame, he pitched, I believe, 5 2/3 innings pitched. A lot better, a lot cleaner of a ball game. And he only gave up 1 run in that ball game. He's a typical lefty, throws a fastball, changeup, as does Quintana. They both have changeups and a curveball as well. He's 23 years old, DJ Hers is, and this is his rookie season. We've seen already 2 rookies at this point, I believe, in Mitchell Parker last night, and now DJ Hers for the Nationals. So again, it just backs up the point that this Nationals team, they're young, they're hungry, and they want to sort of prove to their fan base and their organization that they are here to stay and make a name for themselves. So again, the Mets lineup is going to have a little bit of a tough task dealing with that kind of effect. But Jose Quintana, that's now 4 straight quality starts from a Jose Quintana. Perfect in terms of not giving up any earned runs in Philadelphia. That is a lineup that it's not a joke of a lineup whatsoever. We know how stacked that Philly lineup is. And to go out there and throw 7 scoreless innings from Jose Quintana, the changeup was working. I think D in the chat was talking about the curveball that Quintana brings out as well. Again, I think when he's at the top of his game, he'll utilize the changeup a lot more often because that's where he gets more of his swing and miss. And he usually keeps it a little bit more down and gets the ball right underneath those bats to induce some of the strikeouts if he's having one of those games where he's really feeling himself. But again, he uses his, I believe it's a sinker that he throws, as does the other lefty, right, in Sean Manaea on this team, and a 4-seam fastball to sort of set up those off-speed pitches. Let's make it 5 in a row, Jose Quintana. Again, I'm always weary. There's always something in the back of my mind when Jose Quintana, like Tyler McGill, goes out there. Your 4 and 5 starters. They've been absolutely on a roll as of late. I hope that continues, but I always have that sort of feeling in my head. I'm like, please do not let this be a bad outing. We need every single game we can get. But again, I really do think that Jose Quintana has earned and should earn the trust of Mets fans to go out there every 5th day as a veteran and provide exactly what this Mets team needs. So, you know what? We'll see what happens. I hope the changeup's on point because, as I mentioned in his last start, as soon as I see that changeup working in the 1st and 2nd inning, I know Jose Quintana is in for a good night. And hopefully, just like last night behind Tyler McGill, the New York Mets offense comes up and they're up to the task in terms of putting up runs against the Washington Nationals for the sweep.
Yeah, absolutely. And, this should be a good matchup for Quintana because this is a free swinging lineup. They don't walk a lot. They swing the bat. And, if he gets, maybe that curveball, that changeup worker, either one of them, get them fishing outside the zone, he can have a good amount of strikeouts today and, have them flailing at those breaking pitches and off-speed pitches because there's no reason why Quintana shouldn't have a good night tonight. This is the perfect lineup for him. And, nobody was expecting what he did against Philadelphia, who's a very good hitting lineup and can easily hit the ball over the wall. And that was a great performance by him. But he's got to do it again today. You can't pitch bad against a Nationals team that is young, inexperienced, and they like to swing the bat. Don't keep this ball in the strike zone much. I think they're going to chase a lot. And you've seen in these last two series that they chase the ball a lot. They like to go out of the zone. They're not very patient at the plate. And I think that can work in Quintana's favor. So hopefully he does what he needs to do tonight. And we're talking about a Mets sweep in the post game. And, hopefully talking about another Braves loss as they blew a lead yesterday and Cincinnati beat them. Arizona did win today. They just won. So if the Mets win today, they keep pace. And again, all we got to do is stay tied with Arizona, and we have the tiebreaker. So, again, if we end up the second wild card, we're playing Padres. Go figure, right? We might pay the Padres. Like, everything's coming full circle in 2024 all over again. The Braves, the last couple of series of the year, back in Atlanta, possibly playoff stakes at hand. And we could face the Padres again in the playoffs, in a wild card, this time in San Diego, if we're the second wild card. So it's crazy how everything's coming into like full circle, Chris. And, I know I'm thinking ahead a little bit, but, it's just, we do have the tiebreaker. So I just wanted to bring that up for everybody, because you notice the stand-ins, how they have the Mets behind Arizona. And I'm like, wait, that doesn't make sense at all. The Mets have the tiebreaker. I know it's kind of like little picky things that I'm annoyed at, but put the Mets over Arizona at that point when they're tied, because they do have the tiebreaker. It's kind of confusing and make it seem like the Mets aren't, better right now in quote unquote stand-ins and tiebreaker wise. It just annoyed me when I saw that. But besides the point, we all know what it is. But again,
Where'd you see that? Where'd you see that? Because ESPN had the Mets above the Diamondbacks when I checked.
They were the only ones. MLB, Yahoo, I checked all of them. ESPN was the only one, and what's shocking because we know ESPN hates the Mets, so it's kind of odd. But it was weird how a lot of the other apps, a lot of the other networks or websites all had the Mets behind Arizona, even though they were tied, and the Mets have the tiebreaker. So it was just weird. It annoyed me this morning when I was waiting to start work, and I was just looking at my phone, looking at stuff, and looking at doing the math and stuff like that, and how many games do we need to clinch a postseason berth and all that craziness that I like to do. But yeah, it just annoyed me a little bit. But yeah, ESPN was the only one that actually had it, which was surprising to me. So listen, this lineup. Most of this lineup it's very similar. Nimmo's in the lineup. Martinez is not. Most of these guys almost all of them were in the lineup yesterday, and they scored 10 runs. Nimmo's back in the lineup, giving him a day off, and it is amazing, right? You would think, oh wow, Nimmo's not in the lineup, and we know he's been struggling, and then this lineup throws up a 10 spot. This lineup is just insanely, just shockingly productive without many of the guys that we hoped that would do well. We know Alonso had the, half of the RBIs. He had a really good night. Let's see if he can do it again. Just imagine we can get Vientos going a little bit more. Alvarez, who hit a bomb yesterday. Look, this line, I don't know why, but Iglesias and Marte, when Lindor comes back, these guys need to be at the top of the order. I'm sorry. If you need to push everybody down, Chris, Iglesias is just a guy that I want at the top of the order from now on. And Marte, too. If it has to be Lindor, Iglesias 2, Marte 3, and then whoever else you want to do 4 through 6 with Nimmo, Alonzo, Vientos, or Martinez, I'm doing that because I don't want to put Iglesias and Marte at the bottom of the order anymore when Lindor comes back. I think they're too crucial to this team at this point. Marte with the game-winning hit the other night. Iglesias is just being Iglesias again. I don't know about you, but those two guys I want at the top of the order with Lindor when he comes back. But this lineup is badass again tonight. 100%, Chris.
Yeah, I love this lineup 100% and giving JD Martinez that day off because he's been absolutely putrid for this team as of recent, especially in the entirety of this month of September, which we're already at the 18th of September, which is actually crazy. This time is flying by, and before you know it, it'll be October playoff baseball time. But yeah, I agree with you. Marte has been absolutely solid. We all know what Jose Iglesias brings to the table, and really, coming into the season, if we were talking about batting, Jose Iglesias or Starling Marte at the third spot, we'd be like, what the hell type of season have we embarked on? But it really does depend on Brandon Nimmo and Pete Alonso and their production for the rest of the season. Do I think that anyone other than a Pete Alonso or a Brandon Nimmo are going to hit third? No, that might be a little bit of a stretch ask, even though honestly with the statistics, Rob, I would be honestly I would tend to agree with you. Like if you just look at the statistics alone and that's how you make your lineup, obviously that'd be the case. But I just don't think, right? I think that the name behind these bats and their ability to hit the for power first and foremost, they want that to be in those classic 3 and 4 spots. And quite simply put, Marte or Iglesias don't bring you much power. So again, the 2 and the 5 spots respectively are a little bit more reserved for those types of hitters, I would think. But then again, you see the other household name in this lineup in Tyrone Taylor, who is killing it in the month of September. For those of you all who did not, listen to my pre-recorded episode, my player spotlight on Tyrone Taylor, I dropped it at 2 p.m. today. The link's in my description in my live chat right now as this video is going on for you all, this live stream. It's in the description. Make sure you go check it out. He is killing it, right? He's got a 5-game hit streak. He's 6 of his last 16, right? With 6 hits in his last 16 at bats. That's batting 375, if you don't know, right? I had to do the quick math myself on the calculator because I can't do it in my head. 946 OPS in the month of September. He's batting 286 in the month of September overall, and his on-base percentage in that time is 375. This guy is getting it done for the New York Mets, and he's been extremely versatile this entire season for the New York Mets. And so for Carlos Mendoza to see him absolutely raking in this month, has a 5-game hit streak, and he has a multi-hit game last night to put him back in that 5 spot. And we were kind of like, whoa, Tyrone Taylor in the 5 spot. We haven't seen that too often, right, in the pregame stream yesterday. And guess what? He's right back in the 5 spot. So I absolutely love it. Obviously, you have your staple. I think that this bottom of the order, especially Francisco Alvarez, who we saw hit that home run on a 1-1 mistake. Again, 1-1 is still relatively early in the count. And guess what pitch Francisco Alvarez hit that home run on? It was a splitter that didn't do anything. It was left up in the zone, a little bit more on the outside part of the plate, and he pulled it, and he absolutely hit a moonshot. So Francisco Alvarez also starting to slowly take more competent at-bats, and if he does, right, and Harrison Bader gets going, if Tyrone Taylor continues this, and if Luis Angel Acuna is able to keep this pace that we've seen over this short sample size, that bottom of the order is amazing at this point. Like, what other bottom of the lineup and around the league on any team would you rather have? So again, I don't want to compare the Mets to anybody else. This lineup is deep. We've always talked about it, but the problem has been consistency, right? Or lack thereof. The inconsistencies have been the worry. There's no more time for inconsistencies. I love the personnel. I love that Starling Marte, as I had mentioned previously, right? We were debating whether when Francisco Lindor was still here and he wasn't injured, whether we were going to see Marte at the 2 spot or Iglesias at the 2 spot, because it seems like they are the consensus to be there with how well they've been doing and how consistent they've been with the bats. So I'm really happy. And you see Starling Marte, right? He's not playing in the field, but Carlos Mendoza wants him in this lineup, and he's going to do everything possible. He could have went out there and gave JD Martinez that DH spot again tonight. He could have went and put in another lefty and Jesse Winker, right? I know they're facing a lefty and they're playing the matchups because of it, but he could have done it. But he wants Starling Marte in there at all costs. So we'll see what happens. Hopefully they're able to resemble anything like last night. And, hopefully they're well on their way to a victory. One thing that we didn't talk about was actually awesome to see. Maybe he finally gets it going in relation to the video that I dropped 2 days ago about how awful he's been against the slider. Pete Alonso hit a slider, took it the opposite way, and hit it off the wall for a double last night. It was awesome to see. It was beautiful. And again, that was just one of his, I believe, 3 hits on the night. So keep it up. This entire lineup, get Jose Quintana some run support, and we are going to be one happy bunch right here in the live chat and on your screen with Rob and myself coming at you with the post game tonight.
Absolutely. And yeah, that was the best at bat for Alonso, that opposite field hit off the wall. Like that was balance, that pitch that is its kryptonite. He took that the other way. That's when Pete Alonso is going at his best. And let's hope it continues, because everybody can say about the home runs. Who cares? Right? That's nice. It was 6-1, wonderful. But that ball off the wall was peak Pete Alonso. When Pete Alonso's going good, that's how he drives the ball to right center. And that's exactly what he did yesterday. And I want to see more of that from him. Again, we've seen him do it one game before. He needs to pick up after a good game and continue it. And you see the difference with this lineup. When Pete's going, it's very hard to get through this lineup. When Pete's striking out and not playing well, pitchers feast to can't wait to face him. And in the middle of the lineup, it hurts the team. It hurts the lineup. When he's going, the pitchers have no way out. And that's the difference where Pete Alonso is going with this lineup. Makes it even better. We always talk about that next level. Pete Alonso makes it the next level. So, and by the way, I know people are talking about the OMG sign, the big one that was behind on plate last night. That is Jay. That makes the sign. He was the one that made the sign. OMG, met Iglesias and all that, and got the sign to them. It's J Mac Customs, JAYMAC Customs.com. If you want, I know he has a ton of orders, so it might be delayed a little bit. But he will get your order in. He was the one that made my channel logo a year ago. He made my channel logo. Big sign. I know you guys saw it when I was still in New York. It was behind me. He does great work. It's perfect. It's really good detail. I mean, it's amazing detail. Once you get it in your hand, you realize how much work goes into it. So he's a cool guy. I'm glad he's finally getting noticed all over the place now. I know he had to hire some people because that OMG orders were crazy how big they were. But good for him. He's benefiting from his hard work finally, and that's awesome. So jmaccustoms.com. Again, he has the pins now. I know he has different type of signs of OMG and all that fun stuff. He does personal orders. I'm not sure if he's doing personal orders now, but I know he's really trying hard with the OMG signs. So make sure if you're going to order, make sure to give him a chance. I know he's been working hard and going crazy making those signs, and awesome for the Mets and awesome for him. So any final thoughts, Chris, before we hang it up?
No, yeah, I agree. Go check out Jay's stuff. He definitely deserves that recognition 100%. I think we follow each other on Instagram or Twitter or whatever, and I just like look at all the signs that he's making, and he sort of posts the signs that he's making and the sort of progression that, what it goes through to be what the OMG sign is at the end with the final product. So it's awesome that he's finally getting that recognition. The only final thoughts that I really have are that Francisco Lindor, obviously, I think Carlos Mendoza and a bunch of reporters were saying that he wasn't resuming baseball activities, and obviously he's not in the lineup today. We're not going to see him today, and he's also in doubt, like questionable for Game 1 of the Phillies series, which I think starts tomorrow, right, Rob? No off day. It's tomorrow. No off day. So he's questionable for that. But then I saw videos of him out in the outfield running and throwing baseball. So I was like, what do you mean he's not doing baseball activities? That's kind of like contradictory.
They were talking about it before we went live on WFN that they had what's his name? Evan Roberts and Tiki Barber. They were at the SNY studio and they were talking to Todd Deal, and they said, yeah, Lindor was working out. Like he wasn't doing baseball activity, but he was running, doing like, pivot drills and side to side drills and all that. So, just because he's not swinging the bat, which is, I think is probably going to be the biggest test for him, because I think he's going to be fine going left to right and playing shortstop. It's the swing, the torquing of the waist and the hips. That's when you're really going to put that pressure on the back. As we all know, if you play baseball, that's going to really, do some really his final test. So I just think they want to make sure he's healthy with all aspects of what you do in baseball, side-to-side drills, running, and then the final test would be the bat. Again, it sucks that we might not have him, most likely not have him tomorrow for Game 1 against the Phillies, but this team has played well for the most part. Besides the Philly series, with the Philly series, obviously without Lindor, they still put up a decent amount of runs. They played well. People are stepping up, and that's what you got to do. You got to step up until your man comes back. And that's what they got to continue to do. And by the way, guys, to finish this up. And Chris, that was your final thoughts. I'm sorry, I cut you off in a second.
No, you're good. No, my final thoughts are, I just want this lineup to continue what they've been doing. The guys that are hot right now stay hot. Iglesias, right? Marte, Taylor, Alvarez, who's been swinging the bat better. Acuna, I can't wait to see his at bats tonight as well. It's exciting stuff. It's an exciting time in Mets land. And again, at this point, we always talk about, and we talked about a sweep versus a series win. Well, we got the series win. We did that, and we set ourselves up for success in terms of winning game 1. You took the series in game 2. So now that it's game 3, right? We're approaching first pitch in just under an hour. I am not satisfied with anything outside of a sweep, especially against the Nationals. So go get it done, because I want to be hype on the post game, and I want everybody in the live chat to spam those W's. We'll see you all in the post game.
Absolutely. So hit that like button, guys. Subscribe to the channel. If you're on X or Twitch, head over to YouTube with the link. And make sure you subscribe, guys. We'll be doing a post game tonight. Hopefully, we're talking about a Mets sweep of the Nationals. And listen, anything less is going to be very disappointing at this point, since we took the first 2. But I did a quick count before we end the stream. The Mets are 11-4 in September. I didn't even,
Yes, they are.
The way Met fans were sounding this, the last 2 weeks, it's like the Mets are like one of the worst teams in baseball in September. They're one of the best. They're 11-4 in September, could be 12-4 by the end of the night, and could have 84 wins by the end of tonight. And that's really good news. That means we don't lose any ground on the Braves, and we stay ground and tied with the Diamondbacks. So, guys, with that said, another amazing Mets pregame show in the books. With that said, have a good night. Enjoy the game, guys. We'll see you on the post game whenever the game ends. Chris, I'll see you later. Everybody in the chat, we'll see you later. Let's go Mets, and enjoy the game, guys. See you tonight.
Let's go Mets. See you all later.
Meet the Mets, meet the Mets. Step right up and greet the Mets. Bring your kiddies, bring your wife. Guaranteed to have the time of your life, because the Mets are really socking the ball.